Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, this is going to be very personal about something that I did recently, something that I've gone through, and a huge mistake that I've made when it comes to my health and prevention. In 2018, I had some type of breast exam. I think I had an ultrasound, and it showed that I had an issue, which was some type of like complex cyst of some sort. And then I ended up going to this breast cancer or breast specialist center. I shouldn't really call it the breast cancer center, but some type of specialist center. And the VA was great. They referred me there. I got some more scans and some things done. As a result, they told me very firmly that they recommended that I get a lumpectomy. It was right before the whole thing started happening with the illness going around, before that whirlwind happened, like a tornado. So they said this to me, and I was really like, oh my gosh, that's very serious. Thinking about it, like, that is very serious. A lumpectomy, I don't have a lot to work with, and to me that would be a major deformity. And I thought about what they said, and then initially I went with it. Like, I just listened to what they said, and I had things scheduled. And my brother, I called him and asked him if he'd be able to drive me to this appointment, because I live in the boonies, so it's far away. So that happened, and then I decided, my intuition kicked in, and I decided I need to get a second opinion, because this sounds very extreme, and it just doesn't sound right. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Once again, the VA was great this time, and they referred me somewhere else. I do have to choose the place. I have to research. I have to find these expert places, and that's what's very difficult because of where I live. I'd basically, if I want to go to the best place, I'd probably have to drive to another state, and I mean a very long distance drive. So I kind of just do my best trying to find people like 2 to 4 hours from where I live. What's most surprising to me is that they didn't recommend a biopsy, which is something that's quite common. Instead, they wanted to go straight for the lumpectomy. I'm so grateful that I got a second opinion. They have a rating system for the potential seriousness of your breast abnormality, and it's BI-RADS, and mine was BI-RADS 4. And I believe they normally do a biopsy if you have that. So I ended up finding a doctor to get a second opinion. I ended up seeing him and getting maybe an ultrasound done. I can't really remember. And he ended up saying that, no, I don't need a lumpectomy. I don't need a surgery, and that I should just follow up. I think he said in 6 months, and keep an eye on it. And you know, guys, this is where I made a big mistake, and I did not follow up. I honestly, this may sound crazy that one could forget about something that seems so important, but when he kind of gave me the okay, everything's fine, I don't know what happened. The whole thing, illness going around, was very much distracting to everything else. And honestly, like, I don't know how. I have no idea how, but I managed to forget about it entirely until now. More recently, so I had my genome sequenced recently, and I already knew that I have one of the genetic mutations that puts me at a higher risk for breast cancer. The BRCA mutations are most well known and most feared. The information online about my mutation is kind of conflicting. In some charts, it looks like it really doesn't increase my risk to a high degree like the BRCA mutations do. So I appreciate that doctors are really into prevention, but I also think they may be going a bit over the top at times. When I was looking for information on the CHEK2 mutation, I stumbled upon charts that were wildly different from site to site, some showing that my risk is very high and others not so high. I definitely have the CHEK2 mutation, and it does increase the risk for breast cancer and some other cancers to a certain degree, but luckily I have no family members who have had breast cancer, and I'm pretty healthy. When I did have the abnormal results in 2018, it was a time when my health and diet weren't so good, so I'm hoping for the best until I can get back in to get this looked into. I need to get it. I haven't gotten it examined in so long, and my VA doctor used to regularly refer me to get breast ultrasounds, and this is because many years ago I went in and they said I have dense breast tissue, so it's hard to see anything on a mammogram. And so for that reason, I was able to get ultrasounds instead. every year, and that worked very well for me. With that said, I've still had a handful of mammograms. So more recently, I've come to some realizations, and I've realized that numerous times in the past, I feel like I've been really pressured to do certain things that I'm not comfortable with when it comes to scans and different procedures and such. Right now, I've decided I do not want to have mammograms because I don't want the excess radiation, and there's also no point for me to start with a mammogram because I have extremely dense breast tissue. So the mammogram is not very effective at detecting cancer in women with dense breasts. According to Yale Medicine, with conventional mammography, sensitivity can drop to as low as 30% in women with extremely dense breasts. What they won't tell you also is that dense breast tissue absorbs significantly more radiation during a mammogram compared with normal fatty breast tissue. Even with that fact, the guidelines always recommend it. They'll then recommend other tests as supplemental options. How does that make sense? I do not want to have excessively concentrated radiation to the area that is supposed to be, this is supposed to be done as a diagnostic for cancer, while potentially causing me issues that could contribute to developing that very thing. So for that reason, I'm just not comfortable with it. And I've had some really big problems with doctors trying to basically force it and not give me any other options. One CT scan exposes you to at least 150 times the radiation of a single chest X-ray, according to research. The total dose of radiation received during a mammogram is around 0.4 millisieverts. For a CT scan, it's between 0.3 and 0.10. 3D mammograms are extremely popular now, and they're often recommended to women. If you're a woman over a certain age, you've probably had one done already, and I've had at least one. According to an investigative news report, and the link will be in the description, some doctors are really advocating for 3D mammograms. Dr. Stephen Rose, a radiologist who works for Solis Mammography, testified in favor of 3D mammograms at an FDA advisory panel. He's received over $317,000 from companies that manufacture mammogram machines over the last 6 years. When interviewed, he said that industry money has no influence on him at all. If you'd like to look up a specific doctor, hospital, or company to see any funding that they've received from manufacturers or drug companies, check out openpaymentsdata.cms.gov. Let me clarify that I am not against mammograms in general, and I know it's an important and useful diagnostic tool for certain women when used properly. I'm grateful we have this, but we need much better and safer long-term options. What I am against is a one-size-fits-all approach to medical care, and that is an issue with breast exam options offered in the U.S. It doesn't work well for everyone, and the radiation is a major issue, even though they will tell you that it isn't. There are alternative options, but they're less promoted, less available, and not offered to most women. Advanced 3D ultrasounds are becoming more prevalent, and many are using AI technology to avoid technician error, which is an issue. I think this will become the future of breast exams. If you're looking for this option where you live, you can look up Automated 3D Breast Ultrasounds, ABUS, to see if it's offered near you. I hope in the future that we have better and safer long-term options. I knew very little many years ago when I had some issues. I had a brain injury years ago, I had some things happen, and I had repeated CT scans. That in itself is excessively high amounts of radiation. At this point, I'm 41. I want to live a long and healthy life for the rest of my lifetime, and I do not want to compromise on that. And I know that sounds like so over the top to some doctors, trust me, but that's where I'm at. Right now, something happened, okay? So more recently, I had to go find another doctor. I did end up finding a place and a person. She's a surgeon, and she specializes in high-risk breast issues. So I ended up seeing her a couple of weeks ago. My son was really nice. He drove with me. It was quite far, many hours away. I was shocked by a couple of things. So her approach was a little bit different, where she said that she did recommend the mammogram. She recommended that I get scanned every 6 months. Now, to me, even if I am high risk, that seems extreme. But she said a mammogram, and then 6 months later, an MRI with contrast. So when I saw this doctor, I told her that I'm not really comfortable getting mammograms. And to my complete, total dismay, she said, okay, that's your choice. This is just their standard recommendation that we are told to tell you, and you can do what you feel is best. So I was floored. I was super impressed. I was super grateful, completely shocked. I just have such bad experiences with so many doctors. I couldn't believe what she said. But there was more to the story, and she ended up saying to me, you can get an MRI instead. And I did ask about ultrasounds. She said something about the people who are doing the ultrasound need to be very skilled, and she made it sound like she doesn't know any, and that the people reading that also need to be very skilled, and it sounded like she didn't know any. Now, that's a little bizarre because I get the concept, but she needs to fix that, because for a lot of people, I think that is a good option to have these ultrasounds. I mean, I just don't understand why she can't find someone. In the past, I would just go to the hospital nearest to me and get it done, and their person would scan and read it. And I totally understand you should find the best one you can. I just wish she could do that, because she probably knows a lot more people than I do, and that's not something I can just kind of shop around looking for very easily. With that, she kind of brushed that aside, and instead she said, we need to get you checked. So if you're not comfortable with a mammogram, you can get the MRI with contrast. It is super safe. That's what she said. That's it. And with those words, I was on my way. I was so shocked and happy. My son was waiting for me. We drove a million miles back home, and everything was great. And it was many weeks prior to the appointment that it was scheduled, so I finally had time to research what the contrast material would be. And goodness gracious, it is something that I personally would consider more risky than anything.
Gadolinium is useful as a contrast agent because it gives clearer imaging with MRIs, but it is not without its risks. In 2017, it became banned for use in Europe because a study revealed that it deposits into the brain, skin, and other organs. But in the US, we don't care. There are two types of gadolinium being used, linear and macrocyclic. Macrocyclic is supposedly a little bit safer, with most of the brain deposits being associated with linear. According to research, the gadolinium was found in the highest concentrations in the dentate nucleus, which is deep within the cerebellum. This area of the brain is important for balance, posture, coordination, learning, and adaptation. The globus pallidus is the other area with very high concentrations of this heavy metal, though it was found in many other areas of the brain too. This area of the brain is important for movement control and cognitive functioning. Dysfunction can manifest in different ways, like involuntary muscle contractions or other movement disorders. Around 2017, I had a breast MRI with contrast with gadolinium. When I was there, I do remember trying to refuse the injection, and I ended up caving to the pressure. They made it sound like there was absolutely no other option, and I'd be risking my life, and my son needs a mother, etc. So I looked back at my record, and I found that I was injected with the linear one, unfortunately, the one that is more commonly associated with being deposited into your brain and all of your body. And I know I am not alone with this, as many of you watching have probably had a scan with contrast before. They make it sound like it's no big deal, there's no risks, there's no dangers. If you've had one before, I'm not trying to share this to scare anybody. It's over with, and there's nothing that we can do at this point, but we can learn from the past and not repeat those mistakes.
Women who have a higher risk for breast cancer, they're supposed to get scanned more regularly. The doctors or whoever came up with these guidelines recommends getting it done with the dye every single year. I believe that the more exposure you have to it, the more you're at risk of developing some possibly major problems or some type of problems. If this video does anything to help anybody, I hope this will be part of what could possibly help someone. When I was younger and I would go see a doctor, they would make a recommendation like, okay, I would go in there for an issue, and then they might say, okay, we're going to do a CT scan, or we're going to do an MRI with contrast. I would just say, okay, and I would get it done. I would not question those things as far as I can remember. I mean, there were times when I did, but I still caved and I still did it because they made it sound so serious if I didn't do it. They also made it sound so super safe. And there are times, let's pretend you end up at the ER or something. You're under like a time crunch. It feels kind of hectic. You're at an ER. A doctor is saying he's going to give you an IV with certain meds in it. And you ask them like, oh, is that going to hurt my kidneys? This is a real life thing that happened with me. Oh no, it's super safe. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And I didn't have my phone on me or it wasn't working. And then he injected it. And then I look later and it's not. And it's happened too many times. So I'd rather just say no and then research things. And if I change my mind, then I'll elect to get that done. These people are so used to their standard operating procedures. So I'm finally going to get to the real meat of the story. Fast forward to a few days ago, or rewind to a few days ago, I had my appointment for my MRI with contrast. Like I said, I had done a lot of research online to figure out, is this worth the risk for me personally? That's how I'm viewing it. It seems that there's a risk. I personally do not want a heavy metal deposited into my brain for life. Let's pretend that there's a high chance or some type of chance, 50-50, that it's not going to be deposited in my brain or body. Cool, but I still don't want to do that. That does not change my mind. Like, to me, this was a hard no. There was no way I was going to do it. I decided to go to my appointment for the MRI, and I did research online where I even looked up, is it okay to kind of like refuse? Is it okay to refuse the injection of the contrast dye? All these radiology websites and stuff said, yes, of course, it's your right to elect to not have that injected and just to have the other part of the MRI. So with that said, I didn't call them to ask about this. I just assumed, which isn't the greatest, that would be the case. Even though I knew the MRI would not be as accurate without the dye, it would be much more accurate with the dye, I still wanted to get the MRI done because that information from the MRI itself, the standard one, could still be very useful. It's still a great scanning tool. I drove for about an hour and a half. I got there and I went in and I had to fill out some paperwork. Then this lady called me back to this one area and she started talking to me and she said, okay, we're going to get ready and we're going to give you your injection. You're going to sit in this one room. And then I said, oh no, thank you. I'm declining the injection of the contrast dye. She was taken aback and she asked me why that was. I mentioned the research on how it deposits into your brain. And I even said, I know I sound crazy because I know most people aren't up on research, and then when you say something like, oh, it deposits in your brain, you sound like a crazy person. So I even said that. I know it sounds crazy. She was like, no, it's not crazy. It's true. So then I'm like, okay. Then I felt better. So I told her I'm not comfortable with that for that reason, but I would like to get the scan done anyway. She, as kindly and compassionately and politely as possible, told me that the place that receives these results, so this is very specific to this breast specialist who I saw. So this breast specialist who I met with, she has a very specific lab that she wants things to be sent to with certain technicians there that will read the results. And that's cool and everything, but according to this lady, she said those technicians will not read this unless I get the contrast dye injected. And I kind of was completely shocked. She confirmed to me that it's not going to happen. I mentioned to her, I'm sorry that I didn't call because I didn't think I needed to call because from what I've heard is you can just decline this and get the scan done. Also, somehow we were chatting and I mentioned to her that my doctor, who is the one that referred me here, she told me, that the contrast dye is just super safe. And I wish she would have just told me about the potential side effects or any risks involved. And she said, yeah, that's so true. She should have told you. And also, most people don't know about the risks involved in all the radiation they're being exposed to with CT scans. She was saying that to me. That is shocking, by the way, but refreshing in a way. I was just exhausted and I just said, thanks, maybe I'll come back and see you again for, I don't know. And then I left. At this point, I have not emailed that breast surgeon doctor. I have not emailed her. Really, what I'd like to ask her for at this point, I would like to have a peace of mind that I do not currently have breast cancer. And I know this situation is my fault entirely, that the part of how it's been years and I haven't been checked. Just for this initial peace of mind, I'd like to get an ultrasound, and then after that, I can think about other options. That's my very, very personal rant about what I've been going through recently. I'm sorry if this video is coming off as serious or negative or anything. I'm not trying to be. I'm trying to just go with the flow. It's almost Christmas, and this does not need to be stressful anymore. It kind of is, but I'm just trying to move on and hope that I can just get the dang ultrasound. I just want to get an ultrasound and then go from there. I think it's messed up that we don't have better options. In the United States, we're not a third world country. We should have some alternatives. There's always research papers to dig around through and to see what's being done, and so I'm gonna go that route for now.
I think 10 or 20 years from now, we will look back at this time and realize how crazy and harmful some of these recommendations are.